right, my people. This video is about the sun paints the truth in its own light, but the moon sheds light on the truth. Um, by summer 2024, I started writing about the shadow realm. And I started talking about how we don't really live in the realm of light, how we live in the realm of shadow. And this is not something dark, man. It doesn't have to be. It really doesn't. The world starts from the ground up, right, before it hits the light. So, yeah. So I feel like that's where kind of like life came about. Right? So there was like this, I mean, like there was pure consciousness like this, whatever that looks like. That kind of like, built everything from the ground up, or from basically the center out, or from the unified field. It's the same thing. So the sun paints the truth in its own light, and the moon sheds light on the truth. The reason I say that is because I explored something in my writings when I was writing about how basically how we move through this world with our shadow. But like, and it follows us all around, but where does it start and where does it end? And it hit me when we're in the dark, what happens to the shadow is it wraps around us, right? And the minute there's light, it just goes in a different direction. And then it got me thinking about light and how basically the shadow reacts to light. And kind of like the difference between like, the light of the moon and how the world looks like, and the daylight, where basically like every other tree has this different shade of color and all these kinds of things. So I realized something. The difference between the triggers of the day and the same things, how they trigger at night. How often do I don't know, that transition between light to dark and the difference it makes on us human beings. Me, whatever it is. I'm not actually using test subject. So it got me thinking, what if the divine light, which is basically the sun as we know it, that gives us light, is actually very opinionated. And everything basically is in response to that opinion of hers, right? Like, and the opinion, you think about it, the light waves, the spectrum of light, basically, what we're, I can talk about light as well, because I think light, photons don't move, light doesn't move. I think that's just the energy of the sun that's moving. And what's happening is in between, the energy of the sun is moving, and it's like heat, right? Because like the sun is burning. And so what happens is basically the photons between here and there, because photons exist everywhere, are kind of like waving and shaking, basically just like waves. And you have to imagine them in every other dimension possible, because it's the photons kind of like it receives heat, it goes on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. And that's basically the light that we see. It's a bunch of photons. They're so small, but if I turn on, this turns off, and this turns off, this turns on again. And there's a balance between them for this consistency that we see in front of us as light. Maybe this is a theory. Maybe somebody wrote it somewhere. I have no idea. I don't give a fuck. It really is. This reality is really just explored how we see it. So this makes sense. I don't necessarily understand the moving of a particle, right? I mean, like at the very least, a photon, because it's light, it's transparent, or it's translucent, or it's just right, it has more properties, has properties closer to energy than it does anything else. That and the fact that like everything we cook we use heat. So like, what are the chances that the sun is actually basically baking the earth, right? Anyways, I started this conversation was the opinion of the sun, and I kind of realized, as beautiful as the world is, it has its own kind of like that splits and how you have to fall asleep in order for your body to replenish. The world needs to kind of like the darkness. And again, we're in the realm of the shadow. We're not in the realm of divine, right? Darkness prevails in the absence of light. It's not a competition. Light has to try hard in order for it to exist. Has to put an effort. Has to consume energy, right? The sun is a star consuming itself. It's so hot that, if I'm not mistaken, it's the entropy, right? It's an entropy. Like, because of like whatever reasons that was happening in all the minerals, it got to a point where it was so hot it kind of like combusted. And like every planet has the potential to do that, depending on basically how it got formed. Things. But stars are basically just like burning fucking. Um, they're nuclear reactors, dude. It's just like fucking energy. But so it got me thinking. It's like, the opinion of the sun and kind of like the earth really just existing and being life. This is who we are. We are life. We are not alive. We are the evolution of consciousness in this form. Wood is the least, is the most, is the rarest thing in the fucking universe because it requires life. This form of consciousness, which is life, we are that. That's where we are one comes from. All of us can be traced to something, and then all of that something could be traced even further away to something, right? Like it started when water came and some fucking bacterium kind of like got triggered, and one cell became two, and then mycelium came about, other than just plants, and we evolved from mycelium. Me personally, I'm sure that not all human beings evolved from the same humanoids. I feel like at one point there were a lot of humanoids, but we kind of merged. But whatever. We are life. And life in its own kind of has to take a second maybe and reflect. Why the fuck not, right? That'll be cute. So if you wake up every day and you look at the world when there's sun out, and then you kind of look at the world when there's no sun out, forget the activity, forget the energy of the day, forget the people. Like, look at the same thing. Look at an olive tree. Look at a thought you had. Look at a decision you were making and the environment around it. And again, like it's the same thing. And the same thing that you're looking at that has colors. If you look at it when it's just black and white, because the moon sheds light on the tree. It just kind of shows you what's there. It doesn't have an opinion of whether it's green or blue. And it stops basically whatever it is to kind of disguise itself. under the sun's opinion. All right, because different shades of green, I'm sure these are different trees that decided to do different things, so like, they needed that color to absorb energy differently, or that worked for them, or whatever, right? Like, life has been expressing and exploring itself through multiple ways over the past millions of years, billions maybe. But the idea is like, what's the simplest form, the foundation of what was there in the day, is basically what the moon sheds light on. Tree shape at maximum shade. That's basically it. So you're gonna look at a tree, you're gonna see it move with the wind, you can see functionalities, you see basically different shapes of the leaves and everything like that. You can probably feel it. But that eye, right, that whole way of you experiencing the world through an image of it kind of gets shattered and destroyed. There's no more, there's there's nothing but what's left. Like, again, like the foundation, the fundamentals of it. And with that, I feel like, now that I'm having this conversation around it, what we end up doing is we end up, we are no longer distracted, one. Uh, because like, I could look at an olive tree I guess in the daytime for like hours and hours and hours, and you can always see new things. Just like, there's lights, there's sunlight, there's depth, there's angles and all forms of like approach. But at night, that's gone. All that's left is a tree, leaves, branches, maybe fruits or like some form of a flower. All other things we get to explore, we get to look at and be like, oh, this goes to this and this does that, and like, this color would look this way, right? All of these are contextual things. I think we could use a better example, which is basically like, we can't use the fashion industry because I'm sure whoever's creative will be creative regardless. But I think what I'm trying to talk about is just like the fundamental aspect of the tree's existence that we normally don't kind of like give that much attention to. And the truth behind why we get to like, I don't know, it's just, think about it this way. It's the difference between any meal and spices, right? The reason I say this is because, like, you can cook a decent meal, but without putting spices on it, it kind of like doesn't really like that flavor, that uniqueness, right? And we can use Mexican food and Indian food, for example, or Asian food as that example, because their foods are very kind of like, they're mixed with a lot of herbs. But at the core, there's basically the meat, the broth, the noodle, right? They're kind of like basic ingredients that make up the food, the essence of the food. But everything else just kind of like, is the reason we eat. If I think in Dead Poet Society, what does Robin Williams say? I think he says, being a doctor, being a teacher, being a lawyer, these are noble professions worthy of pursuits. But poetry, worthy to pursue, to be able to live, because like they're noble professions under the guise of like unselfishness. Like, I'm teaching because I want people to know like stuff, and like being a lawyer means I want to protect people's rights, and basically like, being a doctor is because I want to help people. Noble professions. But when it comes to poetry, when it comes to writing, when it comes to music and art, these are what we live for, right? And I was thinking of a black and white painting right now, but then we're observing it through the day, so it's different. So the idea is like, maybe most of our time we're lost in an image that was not constructed by us, simply because it's the difference between seeing a painting as the end result and seeing the the artist painting in the process of painting, right? I feel the base structure and the true, like the truth, is basically always kind of like hidden by the extra details that worked. And I connected with this right now specifically because we tend to forget how we see the world and the image we have of it. We tend to forget that. And so what ends up happening is that we end up believing that image to be the truth. But that image was once created because it worked, or was once created because it served a purpose. So, in a way, giving yourself the chance to not look at an image of this world that's already there gives you the chance to readjust your relationship with the world. And an easier way to do that is to see the same world, experience the same world, but experience it at night. Because it takes you back to the fundamentals and to the foundations instead of just basically the beautiful, colored, and like, I don't know, designed end results. So the sun basically paints the truth in its own light, and the moon sheds light on the truth. This is going to do a part 2.